I came to the US with a very clear idea of what I'm going to do. Coming to the Shangri because we have a largest collection of luster tiles. We still have a lot to do. We don't know much about these pieces. We have to talk, we have to encourage people to think about them. We have to encourage those people who's not focusing on, they are not researchers, but they are curious about these materials.
Hi, my name is Navid Najafi. I'm the Associate Director of Programs and Social Practice here at Shangri Museum of Islamic Art, Culture and Design. And today I'm joined by Hossein Nakhaei, who is a historian, architect, and the current scholar at residence at the Shangri Museum. His work bridges Persian art, interior architecture, and digital humanities with a focus on reconnecting fragments of material culture, like Persian luster tiles, to their original architectural and sensory worlds. Nakhaei is currently completing his PhD at the University of Pittsburgh as the 2025 Mellon ACLS Dissertation Innovation Fellow. His dissertation, Luminous Past, Fragmented Present, Persian Luster Tiles from Sacred Architecture to Museum Galleries, interrogates narratives forged by Western art markets, museums, and scholarship, and adopts a reparative approach that resituates luster tiles within the spatial, cultural, and ecological worlds in which they were made and experienced. Hello, Hossein. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Navid. Thank you for inviting me to this talk and for the residency.
Yeah, it's been really exciting to have you here at Shangri. We've done an incredible amount of work in a very short period of time. And just wanted to kind of get your sense of this experience so far and also talk about who you are, your background, and your work. So can we maybe just start with a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and what you're currently working on?
Yeah, of course. I'm actually completing my PhD, as you mentioned, and I came to the US in 2021. So coming from Iran to the US with the specific goal of working on luster tiles. So I came to the US with a very clear idea of what I'm going to do. Coming to the Shangri because we have a largest collection of luster tiles, Persian luster tiles here. My background is in architecture. And then I moved for my first master into history of architecture. But mostly I was interested in focusing on, interior design of these buildings and bringing the architectural lens to the architectural history, actually. And now for my PhD, I'm combining both architecture, history of architecture, and art history, because now I'm focusing on tiles, actually museum pieces, which very important part of architectural history is in the museum, right? When you're looking at these fragmented pieces, parts of those buildings that are in the museum, it's very important to look at museum as a very important resource for architectural history and architecture. And that's why I'm kind of bridging these areas together, bringing that sort of mindset of looking at these pieces from the architectural lens, from the lens of design, what was behind the scene when they design all of these spaces, and when we are kind of dismantling all of this design by kind of removing all of these pieces from their original sites. It's very important to go back and see, not just, do the transition from looking at these pieces from individual and standalone objects to pieces of architectural elements. That's why I'm actually focusing on now to bring this idea and emphasis on pieces, architectural elements in museums, and claiming their identity as architectural elements.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. Your work is really innovative, and you're kind of pushing in directions that not a lot of folks have been sort of looking at the museum world through the lenses that you're examining them, and specifically for Persian luster tiles. A part of your residency here at Shangri, you also did a public lecture, which we did at the University of Hawaiʻi in partnership with the philosophy department at the architectural auditorium. And it was a great turnout, great audience engagement. Folks are really interested in kind of learning the history of museum collections and diving deeper into their original context and all of the sort of critical conversations that we can have around the complications that come with these objects being in museum spaces. And in that talk in particular, you explored luster tiles not simply as beautiful standalone objects, but like you said, as fragments of larger architectural and sensory experiences. Has your time at Shangri-La shaped your thinking any further about fragmentation, not only in the material sense of broken tiles, but also in stories and the histories that they may carry?
I was quite familiar with the collection before coming, through the images, right? Through the images online, whatever I had access before. But when I came to the space and saw these pieces, the first layer that I encountered was, actual physical fragmentation, right? Because for example, for the mihrab, it's very hard to see those cracks, those fragments from the image, because it's a huge piece. When you look at the piece from in person, very close, then you realize that it's, oh my God, it's very fragmented, and there are lots of pieces. They came together, and it has its own history of people who were involved, dealers, collectors. They wanted to make these pieces complete, right? So that physical fragmentation was one of the things that if I didn't come and see this piece in person, I couldn't realize much. Although we had historical photographs, but it's very important to come and see these pieces. Even pieces that look complete, they are still part of a larger, and even ensemble or architecture, right? In my talk, I talked about the tombstone here, the cover of a cenotaph or sarcophagus that we have here from one of the Imamzadehs in Iran, Imamzadeh Khadija Khatun. So that's one piece of a larger ensemble. But when you're looking at it as a fragment, you're just losing lots of histories or background of this piece. In terms of installation, in terms of interaction of audience. That piece was not supposed to be on the wall. It was on the cenotaph. It was horizontal. It's a very important piece. There were lots of respect for that piece. I mean, my idea is mostly, especially by focusing on fragmentation, is to, start familiarizing ourselves with these pieces. We know this is an illusion that we know these pieces. Because it's a reality that we can even write a book about research that has been done on these pieces. It's a large corpus of scholarship. When you find some concept, when you look at them from the architecture, especially from my perspective, architectural aspect, it will open new ways that you see, oh my God, with this background of information, we still have a lot to do. We don't know much about these pieces. We have a lots of scholarship around these things, around these pieces, but still we have a long way to even understand the luster tiles, the concept, why they were made, how they were made. So these areas and areas to research on these pieces.
And just looking at your experience, this was your first time to Shangri-La, and also your first time to Hawaii. And a part of our, focus on the residency program is bringing folks here and wanting them to learn about the history of Shangri-La, to examine the collection, if it's a scholar in particular, when we work with artists, to create work. But also it's really important for us that folks understand Hawaii, and we provide the context for the space and the land that we're on and our host culture here. So you've had opportunities to learn a little bit about Hawaii. I would ask, what aspects of Hawaiian culture, history, or landscape impacted your thinking during this residency, if any?
I started watching some documentaries before coming to Hawaii. So I was aware that, I need some context about this place. Yeah, I had a lot of surprise moments, actually. The first thing was, just seeing the environment of this property, the sound of ocean, because I went to the shrine multiple times. I couldn't hear the sound of ocean near any of these buildings. It brings up the conversation of, why this piece is here. Is it good for this piece to be next to the ocean. Broadly about Hawaii, I think I learned a lot from you, from the other people, in Shangri specifically. Our conversation about the history of Hawaii and what they have endured over more than a century. So that was important for me even before coming to Shangri-La. When you're talking about a subject like luster, Persian luster tiles, or all of these displaced objects, there is always a moment of loss, right? Which is very important. If you want to talk to people and connect with them, it's very important to have a common ground on, having an understanding or, experience of loss. I found these sort of connections or hope to make conversation with Hawaiians because they know they have lost their lands, many of their aspects of their life. So it's very important that when you're talking with these people about your experience of loss, they can understand, right? Because this is a feeling they have experienced or they have heard about it before. This is very interesting to have conversations, to talk with Hawaiians about how they feel. And I'm pretty sure that we can have very fruitful conversation with them and about this topic, about loss, what is their experience, what for example someone like me experienced when come to this land, see pieces that are actually part of another culture, but they have been brought here and in a land that has its own problematic history, right? So that's an important part, I think, that I am very happy for knowing that, and then very looking forward to have more conversations about these experiences and these sort of topics.
Yeah, so Shangri-La is a center of the Doris Duke Foundation, and we really love having these critical, multi-layered conversations. I mean, the mission of the Doris Duke Foundation is to build a more creative, equitable, and sustainable future. How do we do that? By oftentimes having difficult conversations. And institutional humility is also important. Like, we know that we don't have all the answers, but we know that we do want to work with folks that do have the answers. We want to be in conversation with people that are thinking differently about our world and how we can sort of create a new world together. So I think your research, the work that you're doing, and the timing in particular of the research is really interesting and really very important in this time. And I wanted you to speak briefly about the online exhibition that you've been working on for several years, along with collaborators, and also the particular article that was recently released about the mihrab that provides really the full timeline from its removal to present day. So can you just tell us a little bit about that research, and if you do have any sort of inspiration to maybe talk about the timing of how things sort of come together?
That exhibition is directed and it started with my very good colleague Dr. Keelan Overton. She has spent 5 years of her life on this project, which is huge. It's a huge contribution by her and sacrifice by her, I have to say. To me, I mean, I was just a little member of that huge team of kind of collaborators. More than 50, 60 collaborators that are working on this building, and Keelan has directed this project very beautifully, because it's very hard even when you're working with one institution or one, for example, museum. It's sometimes hard, but imagine you're working with 20, 30, 40 institutions at the same time. And the fact that it's very important for that project is an independent project. Right. So especially when you're talking about some topics like displacement, some sort of misrepresentation of something, it's very important to have that sort of sense of being an independent. And I know there were lots of efforts to keep this project independent, and it has worked very nicely in terms of having that aspect. There are many lessons to learn from that experience that Keelan managed to do. I have to say, I haven't seen such a project in the Iranian side, right? Yeah. For me, there are many other layers. For example, the language. We have multiple languages, including Persian. There was a huge emphasis of having this language by Keelan. So, and I think it's very important to talk to your audience, which are most of them are, Persian, right? These are buildings, pieces, luster tiles are all belong to Iranians. So it's very important to talk to them, not having the barrier of language, so they cannot contribute. We released that piece. It was kind of finished right before I came to Shangri. Keelan and I were doing the last kind of edits when I was on the plane. We wanted to have that piece out so we can have conversation. But one of the interesting things that I witnessed was that, the reaction, I got many reactions that people read that piece, which is a long piece. I mean, it's very interesting and, exciting to see when your piece is out and you get reflection. You, for example, see people have read about it, they start asking questions. And even one of the interesting things that I witnessed actually in Shangri-La is that your colleagues were, start reading these things, incorporating the information in their talks to the audience. And that was very important for me because we are working on these pieces to send messages to the public, to our audience, not just, scholarly works. And this is a good thing about website. When you make this pieces accessible, people can reach, kind of read them, reach those content. But the thing that happened here, it took less than a week to have that content of the piece being presented to the public. This was a very important moment for me, that I thought after month of work, it was a huge kind of work in terms of labor, working, editing, communicating with institutions, analyzing, writing the piece. When we see that people are hearing this story, it's so beautiful, right? It's important to embrace the reality, which is based on facts. Yeah. And I think my experience, what I saw here was a good sign for me.
That's great, and thank you for acknowledging that. I mean, yeah, we are very open to new information, factual information, and want to communicate, that reality and the truth and the factual information to our audiences who are here actually physically and also online. So yeah, we were eagerly anticipating the, as the kids like to call it, that article to drop. And we've been following along, of course, on the online exhibition, and so much admiration and respect for Dr. Keelan Overton for the tremendous amount of work. Do you imagine, or how do you imagine this residency perhaps shaping the next stage of your practice, if at all?
Activating some capacity of technology here. I started doing 3D scanning here. So I started this kind of using these methods, and I will continue them in the future. This would be an emphasis in my future work to just, get the chance to go see pieces in person, because it's a very layered history, and it's a necessity to see them in person. Again, the other aspect, the team, very welcoming team. I mean, the collaboration is another aspect of having this experience. You can do better when you have a good team, right? Or people who have the same passion that you have about your topic. It's very important, I think. This is what we have to do. We have to talk. We have to encourage people to think about them. We have to encourage those people who's not focusing on, they are not researchers, but they are curious about these materials. So it's very important, to see that those passions in the broader audience, which I saw here, which was interesting, right?
Yeah, you had a lot of interactions with staff. You also had interactions with the public. Our audience is here on tours, visiting the museum. If you could have our visitors remember just one thing or one message, one takeaway from their sort of reflections or interactions with these luster tiles, what would you want them to take away?
The most important thing is to see these pieces as orphan objects, or pieces without history, as something that belong to somewhere else, something bigger, right? Either it's a building, even it's a culture. So it's very important to just do this transition of not seeing them as beautiful objects. They have their own story, right? And also history. So it's very important to acknowledge that history, read the stories before or listen to the stories that are being told here, and then imagine that when you are seeing these beautiful pieces here, it means that there is something has been lost somewhere else. Each of them are coming from somewhere else, although they cannot talk. But it's important to remind ourselves that they are belonging to somewhere else. They had their own story. They had their own community that sometimes, most of the time are looking for them, right? Because they are known.
Yeah, that's something that we take seriously as well in terms of connecting through the stories, connecting our audiences to the original sites, to the original cultures. Anything from your time in Hawaii, personally or academically, or your time here at Shangri-La that you'll carry with you?
The moment that we had a call with the community in Iran, with the help of the Office of the Cultural Heritage in Baramin, and you and your colleagues here, you're very supportive about this idea of connecting buildings, tiles, and communities, was a very important moment, I think, from my residency, because it's been more than 125 years that these three components are separated with each other. But looking at those people who came to the shrine, and imagining they were looking at an empty space, but at the same time we were looking at the mihrab and connecting these three components together, although virtually it's not a real thing. It's happened. It's not a physical thing, but it's a moment that I will carry. One of the big moments that I will carry with myself. It was a very powerful moment.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it was very powerful for us. And something that I think is really important. And like you said, it hasn't happened in 120, 30 years or so, in terms of the community in that space connecting back with the tiles that were removed. That was a really powerful experience, I think, for all of us here as well. So thank you for facilitating that connection for us. Any final thoughts? Is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience that we haven't had an opportunity to do so far?
Kind of air spaces that we have for research needs creativity and needs, for example, kind of give a space to researchers. At the same time, I'm glad that their stories are being told, right? Which I don't take it for granted, because I have been in many museums before. So I think it's very important for all of the institutions that have these pieces to kind of embrace this reality of displacement. And I hope that I or my colleagues who are working on these pieces see that sort of openness in their work, because it's a very crucial part, specifically for these pieces, that we have more questions than answers for them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you said the word collaboration. I mean, that's something that I think is really important, and something that we really try to push for in all of the work that we do. Our vision for the space that we steward here, this campus, is really to build a creative campus where you have artists, you have scholars, you have community, you have students, folks that are interacting and having critical conversations. And so we are a museum of Islamic art, but we're also a center for ideas and for cultures to come and connect. And I think it's something that is a goal that we're constantly striving for, to try to create these opportunities for dialogue, for connection. So the opportunity to connect with the community in Varamin in Iran was very important. And of course, facilitating research, facilitating access, these are very important as well. And also have to give a shout out to our colleagues at the Honolulu Museum of Art for providing access to their collection as well. You had an opportunity to go see some of those tiles. And yeah, again, thank you so much for the time, for all of the work that you do, for your openness, your generosity with your knowledge and information. I mean, we saw it firsthand how you share so much with our staff, with audiences, with, you know, just casual people that we encountered. And I encourage audiences to continue to stay tuned for more information and to follow along your work, follow along on social media, on Shangri-La, on our website. We'll be sharing much more information about the residency and beyond. So once again, Hossein John, kheli mamnoon, kheli mutshakkiram. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Navid John, and all of your colleagues here for being such a wonderful host. And yeah, I mean, thank you again.